Hey guys, it's Canadian Kyle here at the Wealth Holders Podcast. And today we have David Cole, the CEO of EMX Royalty, ticker symbol EMX on the Toronto Stock Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Kyle. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. And thank you for taking the time to actually chat with me today. Our first two episodes, David, were Alex Zukernick from Nova Royalty, and they obviously have royalties on copper and nickel. And our
Mhm.
second guest was Electric Royalties, ticker symbol ELEC, and they have royalties on batteries. Now,
Mhm.
David, you're actually my third guest, and the first one that has gold in their portfolio. So I was wondering,
Mhm.
what attracted you to the yellow metal, and was it true at the age 11 you became a gold bug?
So it might have even been before 11. That dates back to my grandfather. My grandfather owned the Blackhawk Placer Company that dredged the Clear Creek west of Denver in Colorado. And so I was always fascinated by the mining history here in Colorado and the family history of owning the placer mine, et cetera. So there was a fantastic episode burned into my memory where I was out panning on the ground that used to be my grandfather's mine, and I found some nice color in the pan,
Yeah.
and I was hooked from that moment on. Yeah, that's it. But with respect to EMX's portfolio, um, that is driven. We acquire royalties very differently than the other two companies that you mentioned. Right? We
Yeah.
generate royalties. We get paid to create royalties because we do it through the royalty generation process, and which all emanates out of our geological expertise. And so we utilize our economic geologists worldwide to acquire prospective mineral rights, add value by building geologic models, and then sell those for a combination of annual payments, share payments, upfront share capital in the companies that are advancing those, in addition to royalties on the back end. And so how we have grown that portfolio is all part and parcel to our economic geological expertise, which early on in the history of the company was centered on copper and gold.
And for gold, there's so many companies out there, but what I'm interested in is what you said, that you're a geologist, and I really do like seeing CEOs that are geologists, because in the resource sector you can have a CEO that is a serial entrepreneur, one with a financing or banking background, but you have a geology background, and I really want to dive into that a little more. And the reason is I have four brothers, and my youngest brother is in his first year university geology major. So I was wondering if you could just explain what your career was like starting out as a geologist, and what they can look forward to, the trials and tribulations, and why someone should pursue a career path in geology.
Yeah, so there's a lot wrapped into that question. Let's go back and talk about the this idea of geologists becoming executives running companies, and where value is created. So if you take a spectrum between people purely on the finance and capital market side and people purely on the technical side, very different ways to start out your career, very different pathways.
Mm-hmm.
My view is that the real value is created right smack dab in the middle. And we have a saying here at EMX that astute business decisions are rooted in solid technical understanding. And it's critically important to get the technicals right, and then make the business decisions. But you have to be very good about the business decisions and understanding the capital markets as well. And so I've definitely seen some qualified folks that have learned the technical side from the finance side and done very well in their careers. There's a number of examples that you could look at in the industry today. But there's also some great examples, such as the gentleman who runs Barrick today, Mr. Barstow. Or Dr. Barstow, I should say. If you take folks from the technical side that become increasingly educated, my view is that it's a little bit easier for the technical folks to get educated on the finance side than it is vice versa. But that's all dependent upon the individual, and certainly it's entirely possible to do it in either direction. But the super value is created in the middle, where you're fluent in both aspects.
Right.
Now, you asked about my career and my experience. I was a working field geologist for the first decade of my career, working with Newmont Mining Corporation, and super valuable time. out breaking rocks and looking at prospects and working in mines, immensely valuable time that is an experience base that can be shared and utilized in our decision making going forward. And I highly recommend that to anybody who wants to get into business. But it really boils down to passion. I remember one time I was touring around Turkey with Pierre Lassonde when I worked for Newmont, and Pierre Lassonde had the passion speech, and everywhere we went, he would talk about how, I really encourage you to pursue your passion and whatnot. I ended up leaving to pursue my passion when he was saying, to start this company. And he says, Dave, that's not what I meant. But
Shit.
but there's certainly a great element of truth in what Pierre was saying, and that is that money can't buy passion. Passion is incredibly important, and um, I remember one time when I was young, and I was talking to my dad. I said, "Hey, Dad, what do you think I ought to do?" And my dad said something very simple, very straightforward: "Find something you enjoy doing. You'll be good at it." And then it's not work, right? And prospecting for gold and creating value through this incredibly exciting exploration and mining sector is something that I just enjoy doing every day, and that's my passion.
Now, what was the catalyst for you though, David? Because you're doing what you love. So what was the catalyst for you transitioning from geologist to CEO? Because now you put a lot more weight on your shoulders becoming a CEO, correct?
Yeah, and that has been made possible through the accumulation of just a fantastic team. Yeah. And early on, that would have been with the support of Rick Rule as an investor and Michael Wynn coming in as our chairman, and with an broad experience of helping to start small junior natural resource companies, get them going with a good back office, good CFO support, et cetera, and stick with that mantra of making astute business decisions rooted in solid technical understanding and rocket forward, and you learn through the experience.
Mm-hmm. Now, I did talk to one of your other coworkers or colleagues, sorry, Scott Close, and he said that you had all kinds of stories. He told me you traveled to Peru, Indonesia, Europe, China, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
before we get into EMX a little more, maybe you could tell me about one of your adventures where it just gave you an adrenaline rush and just got your heart racing, and can't believe that
Oh,
just happened.
so so there was one time we were in Kyrgyzstan, and we were looking at orogenic gold systems in Kyrgyzstan in the Tian Shan mountain belt. We had projects there that were up to 18,000 feet in elevation, and we were going over a pass called in Kyrgyz called the Black Camel Pass. And we came over the other side, and there was two highly intoxicated gentlemen driving a car that didn't have any windows and barely had any brakes. It had practically no brakes, and they were drunk as a skunk and decided they were going to drive down the other side, which we thought was absolutely crazy. But anyways, we left them at the top of the pass thinking that they wouldn't actually do it. And we were down and we were looking at rocks down along the way. And a couple of minutes later, here come these guys with eyes this big around, sliding around the corners. It reminded me of Flintstones, where they're using their feet to try and slow down. They were actually going up on the into the ditch and rubbing against the berm with the vehicle, throwing sparks to try and slow it down. And short answer to the story, they made it all the way to the bottom. So then we got to the bottom, and you have to cross this big roaring river, and it had been a huge avalanche cycle the year before. And so there was a big avalanche path that had crossed over the river that had yet to melt. And so they had created with a bulldozer a pathway over the top of the avalanche path because the river had stoped underneath it and melted its way through. So the raging river was going underneath the avalanche path, all the frozen ice and logs and everything that were in the avalanche. And we had to drive over this snow bridge, over this raging river. Of course, if it would have collapsed, it'd been the end of us. That was a fun trip. But plenty of things like that, that have happened to
What
me.
about a rat? Scott was mentioning a rattlesnake too, about something with a rattlesnake in your past. What was that about?
We could tell you a lot. I could tell you a lot of rattlesnake stories. So one time I was working for Newmont Mining Corporation. I was looking at some mine dumps. I was super engrossed in the geology and looking at these mine dumps and everything I've been doing out prospecting by myself. But at that point in time, we would prospect by ourselves. They don't allow that anymore. You have to work in teams, but in case something happens, right? But But I was on all fours on top of this mine dump, breaking rocks with my hammer, looking at them, looking at the minerals. And then all of a sudden, bzzz, there was a curled up rattlesnake. And to this day, I have no idea how in the world this could have happened. But I had crawled right over the top of a rattlesnake. Maybe he came out of the rocks a little bit, but he curled up and then started buzzing. And I was over the top of him all fours. He was right underneath my belly
Yeah.
and just scared the living
Oh my God.
bejesus out of me. And I just popped, the adrenaline just goes
Like a cat.
and yep, like a cat, and it just popped up. And the funny thing is I'd taken all kinds of notes that day and seen all kinds of rocks and everything. It completely vacated my memory. I just had to reorient myself. That's pretty funny experience actually.
Like you said, you're on to other things. So let's dive a little
Yeah.
bit more into EMX royalty. So what I've noticed in the royalty space, many people like pursuing specific commodities like just gold, just silver, or specific jurisdictions like just North America. But EMX has copper, silver, gold, nickel, cobalt, but they're in jurisdictions like US, Canada, Europe, and other places like Turkey and Haiti. So what has EMX vision been from the start, and has it developed over time?
So our vision is value creation, compounded annual growth rate of stock price, value creation, and doing that by leveraging the expertise of the technical team. Coming back to that concept I spoke of originally, and I personally think that diversification is a good thing. So we're happy to have country venue diversification, geological terrain diversification, different types of economic geologic models, deposit types that we pursue, um, and commodity diversification, which comes along with that. And we've always approached it not from the standpoint that, oh, we want to own more gold, therefore
Mm-hmm.
we're going to pursue this gold. Have approached it very differently. Um, my methodology has always been, I want to hire the very smartest geologists I can find that understand this model and are going to be strong contributors. So I've focused on hiring people smarter than I am. Fortunately, I've been very successful. It's humbling to work with this team. They're incredibly astute and very, very, very productive. Guys like Dr. Dave Johnson and Dr. Eric Jensen, just to name a couple of them, and they've done a great job. So we're leveraging their expertise into building a portfolio. And so it's their expertise that determines where we go, as opposed to us pigeonholing ourselves and saying, we're going to be a copper royalty company.
Right, right. And how did that diversification fare during COVID? How has all your projects been with COVID-19 and with your different countries? Because now you're in all these
Yeah.
different countries, so they might have different protocols. Like I know Canada, I'm in Ontario, and you can't even cut your hair right now. Maybe tomorrow, I think the lockdown's lifted, but not even deemed essential.
Hair cutting's essential. Hey, it's a good one. So, it's turned out very different than we predicted.
Mhm.
We thought this would have a big negative impact on our business. Um, and actually, we've been able to maneuver it fine, and commodity prices have gone up, not down, because of loose monetary policy. And there's pent up demand across the globe. It's been a very dynamic year to witness with respect to capital market activity and how that then affects our business. It's been very, very, very interesting. You and I here speaking between Colorado and Ontario via video is an example of how we've evolved. And so we've dramatically cut our airplane budget, which has been fantastic. That's cut the amount of jet lag we have to deal with, and people have been really healthy, touch wood. And we've been able to acquire projects. We've been able to sell projects. We set a record in 2020 for the most number of projects we've ever sold in a single year. When I say sell, what I mean is move a project on for cash shares and a royalty. We sold 20 projects in 2020, which is a record for us. And that's one of our key performance indicators with respect to the business, of course. And so it's turned into a very, very productive year, and also a learning year where we've learned how to trust the people that we have that are already in Europe without having to have expat oversight on them on a daily basis, and other venues around the world where we're working. It's like, get the guys that live there to do this, and we can communicate via video. That's worked out very, very, very well.
Yeah, so I was gonna say you have a lot of exposure in Europe, and I was going to make a joke. Is it because of the women there, or why such a heavy hand in Europe? And maybe you
So
could explain more about your recent deal in Scandinavia.
yeah, I'm very happily married. I'm not looking for anything else. The it's all about the geological terrain,
Hmm.
the commodities that are prospected within that terrain. Dr. Duncan Large was the original gentleman that led us into Northern Europe, and it took us a while for us to catch on. Dr. Large, who helped us in the Serbian asset in the early days in the history of the company, and resulted in us having a royalty on Cukaru which is the largest advancing copper gold deposit in Europe, in Europe's history. That's a company making asset within our portfolio. We had a fascinating experience working in Serbia. Well, Dr. Large, who was intimately involved in that discovery, said, Dave, Scandinavia is the place to be. Great geology. It's very similar geology to Canada, right?
Hmm.
And those belts of rocks were in place before the Atlantic Ocean was created. The Atlantic Ocean, geologically speaking, is fairly young, and so the belt that hosts the Voisey's Bay nickel, for example, just rips right on through Norway, Sweden, and Finland, just as one example. And greenstone belts with gold and all the things you see in Eastern Canada that are so prospective exist in Fennoscandia. And the fascinating aspect is that the state-owned geological surveys have done a fantastic job accumulating geological, geochemical, and geophysical databases that are available for free and are incredibly well organized with core libraries and maps and folios. And it's just it's prospector's paradise. We put an office just down the street from one of the big Swedish geological surveys and have access to those maps and been able to utilize those to make our own geological interpretations, and keeping in mind the ever evolving understanding of economic geologic models of how these systems are formed and where to go to find more metal. And we're now in a situation where within Fennoscandia, I believe we're the largest mineral rights holder of any company.
Yeah, I see it. You guys have so many there, and I didn't know they had that access to anyone there that you could just look at it. That's
The
pretty
other the
pretty
other
amazing.
fantastic thing
Hmm.
about these countries, now let's look at Sweden specifically,
Hmm.
is is that they have very strict environmental regulation. We have no problem with that. The mining industry has no problem with that. What the mining industry wants is clarity. And Sweden has said you can't work here, 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 but you can work over here. And when you work at where you can work, you have to follow our rules and regulations, and you have to pay people appropriately, et cetera. As long as you do all that, please build us a mine.
Hmm.
And so it's that clarity and that type of support that makes the industry work really smoothly. There are examples that we're aware of where volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits were found, mined, and reclaimed in 7 years. The
That's
average in
fast.
the
Wow.
United States to put a deposit into production is around 14 just to get it into production. So, and it's always a catfight along the way because there's so many obstructionists trying to stop you. In Sweden, very mature attitude. We respect our environment. These are protected areas. Don't work there. You can work here. Build a mine.
Hmm.
And so I encourage regulators around the world to look at the Swedish example and to understand what the mining industry does for society. You know, everything that we do is ultimately dependent upon the extractive industries.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I wanted to start this podcast, is because it's almost frowned upon with the younger generation commodities. Like mining just has a bad rep, but really you're using a computer to talk to me. Like you need the materials within the computer, you need everything working, but they're gonna go complain on Twitter with the computer with the nickel they have in
Sure.
it. It's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And you
one
know what? And it's not their fault. It's
no.
our fault for not communicating
Hmm.
better the contribution, the essential contribution that the extractive industries make. You can't think if you don't eat, and you can't eat if you don't mine potash.
Hmm.
And you can't drive electric cars if you don't have nickel mines. So, we just need to understand, we need to do a better job of communicating to folks so they understand the importance of the extractive industries.
Now, one country I want to get a little more into because I don't know much about it, but I see you have exposure in Turkey, and I'm
Yes.
also owner of Sandstorm Gold. I do own shares in them, and they have this flagship project, the Hod Maden in Turkey, and it's just a cash cow. But I see them trading
Well, it
at
might
an
be.
extreme,
Yeah.
might be exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. But I see them rather undervalued. But I don't know if it's, and I know you have a small fraction of your portfolio in Turkey, but I would like to
Yes.
learn more about that area of the world and why Turkey.
I was the exploration manager of Turkey for Newmont Mining Corporation before I left to found EMX. And as I mentioned, I was driving around Turkey with Pierre Lasson looking at the Newmont projects shortly before leaving. I love the Turkish people, great country, fantastic geology. The extended terrains actually have similar geological attributes as to the Western United States within the Basin and Range province. So there's some geological synergies there as well. Lots of epithermal deposits, porphyry deposits, volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits that can be found within that country. I'll also tip my hat to the Turkish mining companies, which over the last decade or 2 decades have become astute miners. And a lot of our, I believe, all of our counterparties now for our projects in Turkey are Turkish mining companies. And some of those guys are doing a great job, including Eson, Madencilik, which is advancing the carbonate replacement deposit, lead zinc silver system, where we have a 4% royalty at Balya, is a great example. Yeah, they have, I think, over 17 operating mines and are a significant producer now. And so, Turkey's done a good job. It was an easier place to work years ago. There was lots of open ground. You could stake ground. You could advance it quickly. It has become more difficult. It's much more competitive now. So we're no longer generating new projects in Turkey, but managing the portfolio we have there, where there are 3 mines being built on our projects.
Yeah, well, 4% royalties really high. I
Balya
guess
is going to be that's going to be a cash cow.
yeah,
Yep. And
that's insane.
hats off to Sandstorm for making that acquisition that put them in the situation where they have a piece of Hod Maden. It certainly is a great looking deposit. The grades are eye popping.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One thing I was hoping maybe you could clarify because you have such a high level of knowledge of geology, and I'm talking to an audience that might have very little, if any, knowledge in geology. So I was wondering if you could explain the NI 43-101 report and how a new investor should really look at these reports and where, because they could be overwhelmed when they first look at these reports, and maybe any recommendations for the listeners out there.
My recommendation to the listeners would be to align themselves with folks that are not motivated through their own pocketbook, but motivated to help them. So you find a broker that has a geologist that where they're motivated to grow your account, and so you utilize those geological experts or those brokers that understand what they're talking about, or by aligning with consultants to assist them. And to understand not just the 43-101 reports, but all aspects of business, because it's a very complicated business,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, there's market inefficiency. That market inefficiency can be captured to those that understand it well, and that's a good thing. And but it's also a minefield, not to make a pun, but it can be a minefield, particularly in periods of capital market pullbacks. So it's interesting to me that the globe consumes on average about 3% more metal every year. And yet, our industry is so cyclical, right? And when it's in a downturn, the very best companies go down demonstrably. And when it's in an upturn, everybody goes up. So you can make all the right decisions with respect to the management team that you're backing and with respect to the projects that they have, and still lose money if you're in a bad period in the capital markets. Right now, we're bullish commodities. We think commodities are going to run here for a variety of reasons. Strong demand, loose monetary policy, which is driving that, plus it's driving a devaluation of fiat currency relative to commodities, I think is also a case that's going to be with us here for at least a few more years.
I'm glad you
And
said that because
yeah,
in 2020, if someone just looking into gold looked at the run in 2019 to 2020, it's been a significant run and they might think they missed the bull. But like you said, with the market inefficiencies, a lot of these really good projects did not, and companies did not even move with the price of gold nearly as much, in my opinion. And with the recent correction, they actually went down even lower. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So you go back and look at history, um, the very tough market that existed from 2011 or so through January of 2016. Um, Excellent companies were shaved off 80%, 90%. Pretty impressive. So there was a saucer shaped recovery. This bull market, technically speaking, if you look at the chart, started in January 2016, albeit very slowly. Didn't feel like a bull market
No,
while it was, but according to the chart, when you go back, it started in January 2016, saucer shaped, a little bit of an uptick, and then consolidation, a little bit of an uptick, consolidation. Um, uh, I hope I'm not drinking my own liquor here, but I do believe that we're just coming into the midpoint, maybe even pre-midpoint of this particular phase of this bull market, as driven by fundamental demand across the periodic table. We're seeing increased demand for potash. We're seeing increased demand, of course, for nickel, increased demand for copper. It's really hard not to be a copper bull right now. And um, I always like to be exposed to gold.
right. I was surprised at how accelerated the EV revolution is gonna be, or evolution, sorry, would be with
Mhm.
this COVID-19. All these governments, for some reason, the way they want to kickstart the economy is go green. And like you said, it's hard not to be a copper, nickel, anything in the electrification market.
Yeah,
And then on the other hand, they're all printing money like crazy too. So now
printing like
it's
crazy.
gold
Those
and
those two
silver.
things combined are very bullish for our sector.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
you have exposure to all those industries right now, so it's pretty impressive for EMX.
Kyle, one thing we've tried to do is try to lead that by acquiring prospective mineral rights in number, lots of prospective mineral rights during the downturns. So when the price of gold's down, we were acquiring gold projects. Price of nickel was down, we were acquiring nickel projects. And touch wood, we've done a fair job of that over our history, and we believe long term you can't own enough mineral rights.
Hmm. So,
And
like
the
you say,
best
you
way to
buy,
actuate the value out of those,
right?
sell them for shares and keep a royalty.
So, like you say, you buy in the bear markets, and with these bull markets coming in the commodities you currently own, do you see EMX expand into other commodities if your team has the skills and the knowledge to capitalize on it?
Exactly the way you just said it. Yes.
Mm, it's exciting,
You're
very
a quick
exciting.
learner.